So you want to build a gaming PC. You decided console gaming is just a waste of time. You checked out my last video talking about why console gaming is a scam, and you decided that you want nothing to do with these next-gen consoles and you want to build a gaming PC instead. Well, you definitely made the right decision, but the next decision you have to make is how much you're willing to spend on building your new PC. For a GPU, maybe you're looking into the RTX 3070, which is a really nice card for the price that they're offering, but there's so many options you have with GPUs, and with processors, you have the choice between AMD and Intel. I would say go with AMD. This is coming from an Intel user, but you can look into all the different options you have with GPUs and CPUs that you can make your own decision based on what suits your own needs. Just make sure that you don't get a graphics card that is too powerful for the CPU that you choose to get. You need to make sure you don't bottleneck your build, because that will pretty much be a waste of money if you can't use your graphics card to its fullest potential. If you guys want me to make more videos about PC gaming tips for beginners, because I was a beginner not that long ago and it took me a while to learn it, if you want me to make more videos like this, definitely leave a comment and let me know. But today we're going to be talking about storage, which I feel is a lot easier to talk about because it's a very simple decision. If you have a higher budget, not only will you get a hard drive or an SSD with more storage, but you'll probably get an SSD. The flash memory that you have in SSDs allow for much faster loading times than what you have on hard drives, where games can take a really long time to load, but with an SSD, your game loads up so much faster. And with the new consoles both using SSDs as their only method of storage, people are starting to wonder if hard drives are starting to become obsolete, if it's even worth buying a hard drive. Even if you're on a budget, is it worth buying a hard drive only for it to be completely obsolete in the next few years? Because you might have some games that will require an SSD in order to play. We're already starting to see that with the latest expansion with World of Warcraft, where you need an SSD. You technically can run it with a hard drive, but I can imagine within the next few years, since the next-gen consoles are standardizing SSDs, and more developers will be utilizing SSD and may redesign their game to accommodate the faster loading times and take advantage of that. A lot of people are wondering about the future of hard drives. SSDs are coming down in price over time. They are becoming more affordable, but hard drives still provide so much more storage for the money that you're spending. For example, a 2 terabyte hard drive will cost you under $60, while the same price for an SSD is only 500 gigabytes. So if you want plenty of storage on your machine and you're on a budget, hard drives are a really enticing option because you get a lot of storage for a really cheap price. Because let's face it, if you have a gaming PC, you're not just going to game on it. You're going to have a lot of files on there, maybe for work or school or whatever. And you're going to need more storage for a PC than you would on a console, right? Not to mention that games are getting a lot bigger in size, and even though SSDs are better at compressing games and making them a little bit smaller in size, it won't make enough of a difference to only need a 500 gigabyte SSD compared to a 1 terabyte hard drive, if that makes any sense. So, the compression on the SSDs is a real thing, and it does do a good job at that, but not good enough to need so much less storage than what HDDs provide for half the price. I imagine even with an SSD, you're going to have a lot of large games that'll be at least over 100 gigabytes, maybe going into the 200 gigabyte range. We've already seen that with games like Modern Warfare. So if you only have 500 gigs, that's probably not going to be good, especially if you're going to use the PC for other things besides just gaming. So I would say whether or not you decide to get a hard drive, an SSD, or a hybrid drive, 1 terabyte should be the bare minimum that you're looking for if you want to have a decent experience and not having to spend half your time on the computer deciding what to uninstall in order to make room for something else that you want to install. Because that can be really frustrating. So I'm going to make it simple. If you have the money and you can afford it, get an SSD. I think for everybody, no matter what your budget is, you should at least get a small SSD. Maybe only like 120 gigabytes even. Those are really cheap. And just use that for your operating system and some of the files that you'll be using outside of gaming. Because if you try to load Windows 10 on a hard drive, it's going to be really slow. So you should at least get an SSD for your operating system. Now, as far as actually gaming, when making the decision between getting a hard drive or an SSD, it really depends on what kind of gamer you are. Because I am someone who had a 1 terabyte hard drive for the past 2 years, and that was my primary storage. I had a 120 gigabyte SSD for my OS, but I just recently got a 2 terabyte NVMe SSD, which ran me about $250. And if you want a 2 terabyte SSD, that will be the price range you'll be spending. You'll be spending at least $200 for a 2 terabyte SSD if you buy from a reputable brand, because they do have cheaper SSDs from no-name brands that may not be as high quality stuff. So be mindful of that. Just because it's a cheaper price tag, it might be enticing, but keep in mind that it might not be from a good brand that is reputable and makes high quality products. And that's just something that you need to keep in mind for anything, whether it's a power supply, motherboard, anything. Don't get cheap shit from a no-name brand because it's probably not going to be good quality and you'll probably have to replace it and you'll end up spending more money. You're not going to save money because you're going to get a cheap piece of shit that you'll have to replace in a year. Trust me, I learned the hard way when I decided to buy a cheap-ass monitor that had dead pixels all over the screen within an hour. So, yeah, definitely don't cheap out on anything. But with storage, you really don't want to cheap out because it's one of the few parts in your PC that once you get, you don't have to replace for years. Because a good hard drive or a good SSD can last you 10 to 20 years. But if you buy from a cheap brand, you're probably going to have to replace it much sooner. So look for a high quality product for anything when you're building a PC, just a side note there. But as far as the concern about hard drives becoming obsolete and you having to eventually inevitably upgrade to an SSD, if you get like a 2 terabyte hard drive, it'll be useless because there'll be certain games that will require an SSD. I think you'll be fine if you get a 2 terabyte hard drive for now, because there's absolutely no game on the market right now that absolutely requires an SSD for storage, and that won't be the case for at least a few more years to come, because the majority of PC gamers, they don't have an SSD for their primary storage. Most of us are still running on hard drives. Most of us have an SSD for our OS, but we don't have 2 terabyte SSDs, or even 1 terabyte SSDs. Because as cool as SSDs are, most people don't want to pay 4 times the amount of money for an SSD for the same storage as a hard drive. Because like we said earlier, 2 terabyte hard drive will cost you less than $60. A 2 terabyte SSD will cost you over $200. That's a big price difference for literally the same amount of storage, even though there are a lot of benefits of SSDs. Another factor worth considering is that if you're the type of gamer that mostly plays online, you're not even going to really benefit that much from SSD anyway. At least not for a while. So if you play games like Overwatch, Battlefield, Rainbow Six Siege, any online multiplayer game you can think of, it doesn't matter. If you mostly play those types of games, you're not really going to see too many benefits from SSDs. Because yes, the initial load into the game will be a lot faster. Coming from someone who had PUBG installed on a hard drive and then installed it on an SSD, it is a huge difference initially loading into the game. But most of the time when you're waiting to get into a game, it has to do with other people's internet connection than the type of storage that you have. I mean, maybe it has something to do with it where if, let's say, hypothetically, everyone in the server had an SSD, your match would probably load faster, but that's not gonna happen. That's just not realistic for every single person joining a game, especially in battle royales like PUBG where you have 100 players, for every single person to have an SSD. So it mostly has to do with you waiting for other people to load their game, and for everyone's internet connections to play nice with each other so the game can start. That's most of the waiting you're going to be doing for these online games, to the point where an SSD really won't make a big difference if you mostly play these online games. Now, when we're talking about single-player RPGs like Bethesda games, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, or how about the new Cyberpunk that's coming out, I imagine the experience will be so much better on an SSD than a hard drive, and that's usually what the experience is, because when you have these open world games, you also have a lot of loading cells, and a lot of the time you're going to be sitting through loading screens because there's so many different cells you have to load into. For a lot of these open world games, if you try to go into a house, loading screen. You try to take a shit, there's a fucking loading screen. You know what I mean? So I would say if you mostly play those single player experiences, an SSD just might be worth it. But even if those are the games that you play, it really comes down to a decision. Do you want to spend considerably more money for the same amount of storage on a hard drive just to save time? Because that's really what the main point of an SSD is. It's to make things load faster. So if you value that over everything else, then sure, upgrade to an SSD. And I would say if you have the money, you should upgrade to an SSD, because I do imagine in the future there will be certain games like MMOs and other open world experiences that might require SSDs in the future, because the developers will actually program the game with SSDs in mind. So if your main concern about building a PC is future-proofing, you might want to get the SSD. Me personally, I got the $250 SSD and I think it was worth it, but it's pretty steep for most people to spend $250 just on storage. So worst case scenario, if you're tight for cash right now, you want to spend most of your budget on the GPU and CPU and make sure those are really good, then a hard drive is still a good option, even if SSDs are getting more popular. Because worst case scenario, let's say games in the future start requiring SSDs in the next 3 to 4 years. you can just add an SSD to your current storage. If you have room, you can add another SSD near your power supply where your hard drive is, or you could do what I did and add an SSD into your PCI Express port. So it doesn't even interfere with your current storage. Everything you have installed in the hard drive, you can keep. And then when you're ready for an SSD, just buy an SSD and you'll end up having more storage. If you get a 1 terabyte SSD, you'll also have a 1 terabyte hard drive that you bought before when you first built the PC. So years from now, you can just add an SSD whenever you want. So overall, I think hard drives are still worth it in 2020. You don't absolutely need an SSD for gaming, even though they are better than hard drives. They're also more expensive than hard drives. Just make sure you get a small SSD for your operating system at the very least, because if you have it on a hard drive, you're going to have a lot of problems. It's going to be really frustrating because everything you'll do on your computer will be slower as a result. So definitely at least get a small SSD for your operating system, and you can still get away with using a hard drive as your main storage for video games, so that even if the time comes when hard drives become completely obsolete, you can just add an SSD on later. But if you're strapped for cash right now and just don't have the budget for an SSD, it's okay. Get the hard drive for now and get the SSD later when you're ready. Anyway, hope some of you guys found this video helpful. I know a lot of people who are subscribed to my channel, they're already PC gamers and they already know this stuff, but for people who are new, because I have a lot of console gamers subscribed also, this is for you guys. So if you have any questions about storage, definitely leave in the comments down below and I'll be sure to answer them as soon as I can. But that's it for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys again later. Bye.